Thank you, everyone, for coming out today. This is a really cool event. My first time at Sun Devil Stadium, and this venue is fantastic. I also really enjoyed seeing the last conversation between Mark and Fred. So I spent a lot of time around Silicon Valley, and Plug and Play has a special place in my heart. When I was living in Sunnyvale, the local Plug and Play location was very generous in providing free venues available to the public to do technology meetups. And so when I was fresh out of computer science undergrad and moved to Silicon Valley and wanted to just spend all my time trying to figure out all this interesting tech stuff and connect with people, they provided a place for that to kind of grow community. And so I think that's a really cool example, a small one, of what they're about and what they enable. And so it's really neat to see them have a presence here in Phoenix. The title of my talk today is Upgrade to Better Money. And I kind of hope, in a fun way, that a lot of you are wondering what in the world that means and what I'm going to talk about. I wanted to be a little bit intentional in a fun way about building some intrigue. So, a little background on myself. I spent 10 years in Silicon Valley working for startups, leading engineering teams primarily, and then about 4 years ago started angel investing. Started that at a very small scale and just have grown that over time, and now investing into startups is my full-time focus. I do that under sort of my own angel investing as well as an angel syndicate, and the umbrella for that organization is called Exit Capital. I think it's a lot of fun when things aren't the way that they seem at first. And so when people see exit capital in the context of startups, they jump to the conclusion that it means exit like a liquidity event, like a startup getting sold. And that's a reasonable conclusion to jump to, but actually the reason I named it Exit Capital is more about the concept of exit in terms of systems in our society and kind of the political science concept of exit. So if you don't like the system, there are a couple ways you can change it. You can use your voice, or you can use exit. And I like that lens for thinking about technology. We can build systems with tech that give people more optionality to improve their own circumstance. And so that's what I get excited about. Happy to talk all about angel investing and startup investing after this session, but I wanted to zero in on what I think is a really interesting area of tech that not many people are thinking about. And I'm going to start with a quote here from the billionaire venture capitalist, I'm sure you all know him, Peter Thiel. So in his book, 0 to 1, he talks a lot about secrets. And this quote, great companies have secrets, specific reasons for their success that other people don't see. Secrets that other people don't see. I think that applies to companies in the way that Peter's saying it, but it also can apply to technologies, and it can apply to movements in society. And so I thought that I would try to have some fun in this talk and make the theme of this talk about telling secrets. Things that I believe are true that I don't think as many people are thinking about, and maybe are a bit misunderstood today. And at the top of the list of the most wildly misunderstood technology today, in my view, is a thing called Bitcoin. And I'm sure that everyone here has heard of Bitcoin. Some of you are probably exhausted by it. The dots are connecting that you're here for a Bitcoin talk and you're looking for the exits. You're thinking, how do I escape? I'm going to strive to make this unlike any Bitcoin talk you've ever heard. I know that's a lofty goal. Don't know if I'll succeed, but that's the mission, and we'll see how close we can get. Because I think that it's possible that one of the most transformative technologies of our time and most important technologies for human rights is kind of getting overlooked and even laughed at and scoffed at and dismissed as a scam or a Ponzi scheme or a kind of a casino gambling type of project. But really, I think it's much more than that. You all surely know what this word means, fintech, financial technology. You've heard it a million times. There's a lot of great innovation happening in fintech that I am super excited about. And quick show of hands, how many people here would say that Bitcoin kind of falls into the fintech category? Yep, a Monty, great. I would agree with that. I think Bitcoin is definitely fintech. It is financial technology. It's a whole protocol that enables things that were not possible with money and finance. But I have a secret. And that secret is that Bitcoin isn't just fintech. Bitcoin is in a category that most people don't even realize exists. Even brilliant engineers, brilliant venture capitalists. That category is monetech. You probably haven't heard that word before. Monetary technology. Because although Bitcoin is positioned to do a lot of interesting things for finance, it's also competing to be the money, the monetary stack. Something that I don't think any of these other projects that there's a lot of hype around are positioned to do. And it's not something that we're really conditioned to think about or notice or appreciate. The fundamental breakthrough of Bitcoin is that it's the first time we've achieved digital scarcity. It's the first time that there can be a limited number of something digital. So the internet that we've all been accustomed to is one of information abundance. If I have a picture or a phone or a song or a video on my phone, and I send it to you, then we both have it. That's a copy operation. It's not so much that I have this thing and then I send it to you and therefore you have it and I don't. So the internet we've been used to for decades is this internet of data abundance. And in 2009, when Bitcoin was created, that's the first time in history that that's changed. There can only ever be a limited number of Bitcoin. And that's never been true until then. That was the big computer science breakthrough that made Bitcoin. And here is a secret about that. So there's only 21 million Bitcoin maximum that can ever exist. And the secret is that that number is non-negotiable. It can't be changed, no matter what, even by people who are extremely powerful, even by the entities that have sort of made the rules for all of the time that we've been around. We look to them to say what we're allowed to do and what is permitted and what is not. And this was not obvious to me at first, but having put 10,000 plus hours of research into Bitcoin, I truly believe that even if the government, the big tech giants, wanted to change the rules of Bitcoin, I don't think they would be successful in that. And I think that makes it completely unique in terms of opportunities and in terms of projects out there. If you challenged me and said, Stephen, what is the one piece of information that would be most powerful to kind of arm someone with? Maybe the average person, you walk down the sidewalk, you're in a coffee shop, what is the one thing that you could tell to someone, to a stranger, to best prepare them for the future, for the coming decade plus? And it would be exactly that one sentence. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. It's really easy for us to hear those words, but the implications of that being true and completely unchangeable are something that we're just not really conditioned to appreciate. We're not conditioned to notice monetary technology, because the money has really never changed in our lifetime. We kind of take it for granted that things are the way they are. And we're also constantly lied to about scarcity. Because if someone can convince us that something's limited and that something is scarce, then it can be lucrative for them. They can make a lot of money from that. And so it's always the last Rolling Stones tour, and it's always the last Jay-Z album, and it's always the last Star Wars movie. Because if they can convince you that the supply of something, a physical asset, a digital asset, an entertainment product is scarce, then you're more likely to feel that sense of, I have to get some because there can't ever be more. There's a limited number. And it turns out that the more you can convince people that that's true, the more money you can make by creating just one more, if you are Lucasfilms. We're also, another reason in addition to not being conditioned to kind of see scarcity is we're used to evaluating ideas based on people, based on founders and who is behind the idea. So this framework works fantastically well if you are evaluating startups and investment opportunities. So if you're a venture capitalist, you probably applied this framework with great success, thinking about who is the founder, What is the team like? Stay agile, be able to pivot if you need to, because who knows what the future holds. Move fast and break things, kind of that Facebook mantra. And all of that is wonderful in the context of building apps, and building companies, and building products. But what it's not good for is building money. And so Bitcoin kind of flies under the radar. It doesn't really register with the patterns that we've been conditioned to appreciate, because it doesn't have a leader. It doesn't have people behind it. It is a neutral technology. And you might be thinking, Stephen, Bitcoin, so that's neat, but surely you're also talking about all the other innovation out there, crypto, DeFi, blockchain technology, Web3, and I'm actually not so much. I think that Bitcoin stands apart from the rest in ways that aren't obvious. So here is a secret that I would encourage everyone to kind of arm themselves with if you go and you try to navigate this space. Decentralized usually isn't. What I mean by that is that word decentralized has become such a target for marketing and projects similar to cloud computing, a decade ago. So I worked in the cloud space, full-time managing teams and startups there, and we used to joke that at first cloud meant something so special and different. It was this different paradigm for managing compute infrastructure, pioneered by Google and Facebook, and just fundamentally different. And then sort of fast forward 5 years, and every company is scrambling to find a way to slap that word on the stuff that they're doing, because they can appear to be part of that movement. They can appear to be part of this cloud thing. And so it got to the place where you've probably heard that joke, the cloud is just someone else's computer. The quality of the term and the meaning kind of gets diluted because it gets used so much. And I think that the same thing is happening with decentralization. So if projects can convince you that they are decentralized, then they can make a lot of money from that. They can get a lot of marketing and hype and value from that. But what I worry is that we're kind of losing respect for what that term can mean in some contexts. And maybe, just like the cloud is just someone else's computer, we might arrive at this place where decentralization means just more than one computer, which I think would be unfortunate. Wrong button there. All right, perfect. So this, I don't know if those logos are visible. If you think about the cryptocurrency Web3 blockchain space, you probably think that it looks something like this. And I think this is a pretty popular view and very understandable. You've got centralized currencies on one end, like the US dollar, and then you have all of these innovative decentralized projects on the other side. And I think that that's not exactly the case. I think there's some important nuance there. I think it's more like this. That Bitcoin is in a league of its own, and that all of the others are not quite as decentralized, and therefore not able to withstand some of the pressures to change, to kind of bend to the will of society. Decentralization isn't just technical, it is social. And all of the engineering teams behind crypto projects will be very fast to point out how many thousands of servers their code runs on globally. But it doesn't matter if your code is on 1,000 servers or 1,000,000 servers if one person or a small group of people exert social influence over those systems. When I was an employee at eBay, I could run a few commands and that would take action across tens of thousands of computers at the same time. Because eBay is a centralized company. There's kind of an owner and a hierarchy around it. And so the other projects will talk a lot about how many servers they're on. What they want to downplay is that they have founders, they have leaders, they have foundations, in some cases they have corporations with explicit corporate control over the project. And I'm not saying that that means there's nothing special there. Sometimes they're building useful financial technology, it would be a great opportunity for an investment, for engineering. But it doesn't make it good as money. If you are trying to be money, then being decentralized and especially being resilient against attempts to change is supremely important. To have a little bit of fun with this, the creator of Bitcoin went under a fake name. We still don't know the creator's identity. That name was Satoshi Nakamoto. So 14 years ago, Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin. And we still don't know who he is. We don't know who she is. And we don't even know who they might be. We don't know if it was a team. We don't know if it was a man or a woman. We don't know their identity, so we can't judge him or her or they on any other elements. It kind of forces the idea of Bitcoin to stand on its own. But the trade-off of that is that it slides under the radar of our pattern matching. We don't see some brilliant founder behind the project, and so a lot of the ways that we evaluate opportunities, it doesn't register. So, okay, Stephen, this Montech stuff, that's very interesting, but what makes good money? What does that competition even look like, and how do you quantify it? This chart, I know that it might be an overwhelming chart. There's a lot of information packed in there, but if you want to look at fundamentally what makes good money, here are some strengths. Very smart people have been thinking about what makes good money for a long time. This list was started by Aristotle back in ancient Greece. We've sort of refined it as we've learned more about money over the years. So you can see gold, dollars, Bitcoin, how they all stack up next to one another. And these fundamental strengths are really interesting. So it's things like how scarce is it? And you can see in scarcity, dollars kind of gets a red. It's very easy for the banks and the government, based on policy, to create even trillions of dollars, that we saw them do a couple of years ago. Gold has historically been thought of as a hedge against that. Some people love gold because you can't just as easily print more. But we sure don't know how much gold exists. We don't know how much is left in the Earth's crust, and we certainly don't know how much is in asteroids. Elon gets a lot better at all the space things. So the supply of gold is unknown. There was a few weeks ago a $3.5 trillion value deposit of gold found in the region of northern China. And so the supply side, there's a lot of uncertainty. And what's interesting about Bitcoin is that we know with perfect certainty, not just how many there are right now, but how many there will ever be, forever. 10 years from now, 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now. There can never ever be more. And in terms of these strengths, I won't kind of go through and enumerate all of them, but what you'll notice is there's a lot of green in the Bitcoin column, and the areas in which it's lacking are fun to talk about, because the biggest sort of red mark in Bitcoin strengths is it trusted? Does it have a credible history? Are they familiar with it? Are people going to, do they understand it? Will they use it to protect their value? And it gets a red there, but if you just change the framing of that statement just a little bit, if you kind of invert it, then what it means is all Bitcoin needs is time. It already is what it needs to be the strongest money that we've ever had in terms of fundamental strengths. But it's just an educational bottleneck. It's just that people don't realize quite what Bitcoin is yet. It doesn't need features added. It doesn't need to change in some way. But you might be saying, our money's been around for a really long time. This seems kind of hyperbolic. Do you really think that money could change or could be in the process of changing? And yeah, I do. In fact, I have a secret about that. The US dollar is only 50 years old. In that statement, some of you might be history enthusiasts, and maybe when you hear those words, you're ready to stand up and shout that no, Stephen, I studied history, and I know that the dollar was created by the Coinage Act in 1792, and so you're wrong. It's been around hundreds of years. And that's reasonable to respond with, but I think it's not quite so simple. The history of money, the money that we've known all our lives, there's some nuance to it. And in 1971, the money changed. And what's interesting is it was a bit of sleight of hand. So the dollar that we could use for a long time, for hundreds of years, the rules were changed so fundamentally in 1971 that I would argue that what actually happened is they destroyed the old money. They did away with the previous system. They created a new money, and they just used the same name. So the dollar before and after 1971 is wildly different. So in the grand scheme of things, dollars haven't been around too long. It's a relatively modern experiment. And how is this 50-year experiment going? Not terribly well. So this is a graph of how much money exists, how many dollars exist, data shared by the Federal Reserve, and that line represents effectively how much money is printed, how much money is brought into circulation. And that goes back, you probably can't see the time scale at the bottom, but it goes back to 1960, so this is like decades worth of history. And what you might notice is that over on the right side, it's getting awfully parabolic. Are kind of scaling a wall there in terms of how much money we're printing. And that acceleration might make you feel a little bit uneasy. In the last 2 years, we've printed as many dollars as the first 40 years of this chart. And so if you have people out there who are holding something, holding dollars, trying to save and protect their wealth, and you print a lot more, you inflate the supply, then it makes all the dollars that everyone's holding less valuable. It's kind of this indirect way of taking value away from people. Since 1971, the value of US dollars fallen 84%. And in the grand scheme of history, there are examples of money printing gone awry that are tragic. So this photo on the right is 1920s Germany. It's of kids playing with, making houses out of stacks of paper money, trillions of the local currency at the time, German marks. And I think the quote is fascinating. So this is from the journal of a fish market owner in Hamburg, Germany in the 20s. And he said, we used to say the dollar is going up again. But really what was happening is the dollar was staying stable and our German mark was falling. And rising prices, that was much more visible to us than the realization that the value of our money was going down. So we're not used to thinking about the value of our money changing because money is our measuring stick. It's what we use to gauge value. So when we go to the supermarket and you see that eggs are more expensive and steak is more expensive, then you say, wow, groceries are getting more expensive. What you don't say, or what might be true, is that the dollar is falling in value. And so that brings us to another secret. Money isn't just about payments. It's about savings. Payments are important. There's fantastic technology being built around payments. I even think that Bitcoin can potentially be the protocol for all global payments someday. But money is more than that. And I don't think we're as conditioned to appreciate savings. When we go to bed at night, we sort of expect that not only are we going to have the same number of dollars in our account, but those dollars will be able to buy us roughly the same amount of stuff. And for a lot of people globally, that's not true. If you are in Venezuela, if you are in Turkey, if you are in Lebanon, the value of a savings technology is much more apparent because the local currencies are inflating at 50% plus per year. So when you get paid, you have this game of hot potato. You have to go and buy stuff that will protect your value because the money is no longer good. You could say that we're not as conditioned to see savings because the US dollar has been the best sort of fiat currency that's ever existed, or at least the least bad fiat currency that's ever existed. And this is a little secret too. Money happens in phases. So when you look at the history of how money is computed, how something becomes money, I think it's really easy for us to jump to the conclusion that it's kind of this all or nothing thing. I know that was true for me the first time that I started thinking about all this. I thought, Bitcoin is interesting, it seems neat in some ways, but you could never list prices in it because it's not stable enough, it's too volatile, so therefore it can't be money. But the way in which something becomes money is interesting. There are stages to it. And the first stage is as a savings technology, a store of value. And only if it really knocks it out of the park at that, does it kind of level up, and does the next stage become relevant, which is a medium of exchange, pay in percent. And then only if it does well at both of those does it ever possibly get to this place where it is stable enough to list prices. And that function of money is the unit of account. And so perhaps Bitcoin is becoming money, but the phase that we're in right now is just the first phase. It's the savings technology phase. And maybe once we succeed more at this, once trillions of dollars of capital have flowed into Bitcoin, which necessarily means enormous volatility, then maybe it becomes more relevant for payments. And then maybe it becomes stable enough to list and conceptualize prices. What might adoption of new monetary technology look like today in our society? Maybe in the context of business, and maybe even in the context of startups. This tweet is from the president of El Salvador. So a couple of years ago, El Salvador made headlines. They adopted Bitcoin as legal tender. If you pull out your iPhone right now and you ask Siri what is the national currency of El Salvador, she will truthfully tell you that it is Bitcoin. I flew down there to El Salvador a few weeks later, and the first little shop on the corner that I walked to, I forgot my toothpaste, and I walked up to a little market, and a gentleman asked me if I would like to pay in Bitcoin, and I did. And it's not as streamlined as credit cards, but it's happening. Sort of savings first and payment eventually. And so I don't think it's widely understood that this is happening not just at the hobbyist, retail, individual level. Nations are upgrading to Bitcoin to protect their savings and as legal tender. They not only sort of use it as legal tender, which means that merchants must recognize it for payment, but they also use it for reserves. So the same way that central banks have held bars of gold over the years, El Salvador is stacking Bitcoin in the interest of their national security. It's kind of their national savings technology. This is Michael Saylor. He's the CEO of a publicly traded U.S. corporation. And in 2013, he was laughing off Bitcoin. He has tweets that are still up, and he was saying this Bitcoin thing is just gambling, and it's only a matter of time before it's no longer relevant. And he's done quite a 180 over the last decade. And now he and his company, MicroStrategy, of which he was CEO and is still chairman, they've become some of the largest holders of Bitcoin globally. And his quote is really interesting. He's talking about managing their corporate treasury. He says, "We felt we were sitting on a $500 million melting ice cube. We had $500 million of cash and short-term government treasury bonds. And once the real yield on our treasury got to more than negative 10%, we realized that everything we were doing in the rest of the business, just trying to optimize our P&L, that was irrelevant because we were losing so much because of our treasury strategy, because of our savings technology." And so they upgraded from dollars and bonds to Bitcoin. They sold all of those and went all in on Bitcoin at the corporate level. $500 million at first, which was all of their cash. And then they issued $750 million of corporate debt to acquire more Bitcoin. So, dismissing Bitcoin, completely laughing it off 10 years ago, and now, not only does he hold a lot personally, but his corporation is strategically stacking Bitcoin. It's also interesting to hear him explain why, because I think some of us would expect that he's saying, we want to be part of this emerging tech stuff. We want to, we are hip, we understand this internet stuff. And it's not that at all. He's just saying, I am a fiduciary of my company. I have a duty to my shareholders to go and find the safest place for capital. And through that lens, gold and dollars were not as attractive as Bitcoin. Tim Draper, venture capitalist, prominent startup VC, this is actually somewhat hot off the presses. This is from a document that he published just 3 weeks ago. And it was after all the crisis in Silicon Valley Bank's collapse and First Republic and all of that. The title of the document was Founder Considerations for Cash Management. And in that document, he says businesses can no longer rely on one bank or governing body to manage their cash. So we, his VC firm, recommends all of their companies that they keep at least 2 payroll cycles in Bitcoin. Are the tables turning? It's always kind of been weird if, You might hear someone say they hold Bitcoin, and the reflexive instinct is, wow, that's risky. You must have a high risk tolerance because you're willing to hold Bitcoin. Is that changing? Is there going to be some inflection point at which it is risky not to have any Bitcoin? At which zero exposure to Bitcoin becomes, wow, you're brave. That's, good for you, I couldn't do it. That would be a very interesting shift, I think. And I think it could be driven by this type of mentality, people simply wanting to protect savings. Crazy as it seemed decades ago, all companies kind of ended up needing an internet strategy. In the early 90s, late 80s, there were a lot of companies that sort of put their head in the sand and they said, well, this computer stuff is neat, but that's not our industry, so we don't need to think about it. And they didn't do terribly well. It was fatal in some cases. And as crazy as it seems today, what if all companies are going to need a Bitcoin strategy? What if we are upgrading from dollars to Bitcoin? And it's risky to be first, absolutely, but it could be argued that it's much riskier to be last. And so thinking about this, are CFOs going to need to understand Bitcoin in the same way that CTOs nowadays just simply need to understand the internet? An interesting framework for Bitcoin is a defensive technology. What do these statements have in common? Leaving your garage door open overnight, running an outdated operating system with no antivirus on it, and holding dollars. All of those things, all of those actions, make it really easy for people to take things from you. You're not using technology to defend your property. You could almost say there's a bug in the money that was introduced in 1971, and it's been exploited. Maybe Satoshi Nakamoto released a fix for that in 2009, and we're in the process of realizing that and upgrading. So don't let them take your bike, don't let them take your information off your laptop, and don't let them take your purchasing power. There are interesting humanitarian angles to this too that I think we're less inclined to notice and appreciate. For a couple years, I was an advisor to the organization pictured on the right. It's Code to Inspire, so we teach girls in Afghanistan how to write software and how to land jobs. It's a wonderful nonprofit organization. The founder, Paresh Thoreau, is a refugee from Afghanistan. And we had a lot of success we were very proud of what we did in arming those girls with that knowledge, and in some cases, those job interview skills. And they had success landing jobs. And we encountered this whole subsequent set of problems that we did not expect. Once they got jobs, it was hard for them to get paid. And it was hard for them to protect their savings once they were paid. Access to financial infrastructure isn't as reliable over there. Even if there is a local bank branch, sometimes the branch manager is corrupt. Sometimes it's very easy for women to go in and open accounts, and maybe even deposit money. But if you want to go in and withdraw money, maybe they're not going to let you that day. Kind of stuff that makes your blood boil. The system, the access to the financial system is not as equal globally. And so a technology like Bitcoin that makes it impossible for anyone to stop a payment and impossible for anyone to seize that value once that payment's occurred, or especially to kind of quietly siphon away purchasing power from that value. That is, we here can appreciate that. None of us want to have money taken from us, but for people abroad, it's an absolute lifeline. They are desperate for ways to protect the value of their hard work, what they've earned. Money is also increasingly being weaponized. So in the protests in Hong Kong, we saw that part of the leverage used over the protesters was that the government was willing to shut down their bank accounts once they were identified on street camera footage. And the screenshot at the bottom, so in Iran last year, the legislature started thinking about legislation that would block the bank accounts of women who were spotted in public without wearing veils 3 times consistently. The penalty was that you would lose access to your savings. And so, with money increasingly being weaponized, and with banks failing, I think for the first time in a while, everyone is looking around realizing it's not as easy to protect what we have. as we perhaps thought that it was. And so, with that, my final secret that I have in this talk is that Bitcoin is not a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And that might seem counterintuitive. I used to go around and say that I think Bitcoin is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, it's great, I'm very excited about it, and I don't say that anymore. Because I actually don't think that statement quite does it justice. I think that the type of transformation that Bitcoin represents, going from one money to another money, potentially globally, that is very rare and very special. If you look at history, that does not occur often. It is more like a once every few hundred years, few thousand years type of occurrence. And I think that's why we're not really taught to look for it, and to identify it, or to appreciate it. And so I think Bitcoin is far more rare, and far more special than just a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And that's all I've got. Thank you.